Okay, so my life gets pretty busy, and it can feel quite overwhelming, but there are about 7 rules I live by every day to keep everything moving forward and avoid burning out. So that is what we're going to talk about in this video, and by the end, I hope you're going to understand why I find this meme one of the best ways to think about being productive. Let's go. Okay, so rule number 1 is to have a first thing list. So here's the thing about to-do lists. In the words of self-professed master procrastinator Tim Urban, the things on them can feel quite icky. So if my to-do list says, come up with video ideas, that is icky. It doesn't have a clear starting point and you don't really know how to do it or even when it's finished. If my to-do list says write down 10 video ideas and it doesn't matter how bad they are, that's a slightly more clear starting point. If my next thing is to pick my favourite 3 out of those ideas and come up with 3 title options each for them, then we're starting to get somewhere. And it's basically the same with anything. To-do lists are icky, first things are not. Rule number 2 is to have a break schedule. So I know a lot of people like Pomodoros for focus, and I certainly rate them a lot. But something that I've found is even more helpful is to have a really clear break schedule. So I understand when I'm going to stop work, so I know when my work needs to be done by. If you've got long projects to do and your attitude is the work gets done when it's done, it's very easy to sit at your desk for a long time just procrastinating because you're watching the clock. If your attitude is this has to be done by 3 o'clock because that's when you pick the boy up from school, that focuses you a lot more. Rule number 3 is have an attention hierarchy. So one bit of advice that changed my life when I heard it was to match your daily tasks to your energy level at different times of the day. So you take note of the times of day that you're most productive and creative and use them for your high level work. And that might be writing things, coming up with ideas, or studying stuff that's really important to you. So maybe you do this stuff first thing in the morning or after your 2 p.m. coffee, basically at the times when you're most able to focus. And then at the times when your energy dips, like maybe 4 o'clock just before the end of the working day, you do stuff like responding to emails, sending invoices, or other grunt work that doesn't really require that much brain power. And that works great for work, but especially when you have a family, what's also important is to match tasks to your attention level in the times outside of work. So for instance, my 5-year-old loves playing with Lego, or he'll play Super Mario Maker 2 on his own. He's incredible at it, but he does constantly want to show me what he's doing. And so I love chatting to my family, but I can't do my most creative work while they're around. I'll just end up getting distracted and frustrated if I try and work on something like high level. And so I've created what I think of as an attention hierarchy, which is basically a list of tasks that I can do in these times when I'm kind of hanging out in the same room as somebody, but not necessarily like fully interacting with them. So for instance, I can do a rough cut of a YouTube video or look for B-roll while I'm pretty distracted. I can watch Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructionals while I'm kind of distracted, but for brainstorming ideas or actually writing or practicing piano technique, I need to be totally laser focused. And so I save that stuff for when I'm on my own in the house, or I've managed to like sneak away upstairs for a bit. And yeah, you probably do something like this instinctively already, but it's worth having an actual formal list, because otherwise you do kind of find yourself trying to do that high level work when you're going to get distracted. And that can be kind of frustrating. And this brings us to the next rule, which is get the work ready. And what this basically means is the productivity equivalent of laying out all your clothes in the morning so you're ready for work. The idea is that when it's time to actually sit down and get work done, you don't have to spend any time looking around for sheet music or finding your B-roll folder, because all of that stuff is where you need it to be. And this works with a bunch of stuff. So for instance, the book that I'm currently reading always sits on the side table where I drink my morning coffee. The workouts that I do are all part of a long-term program, so I have to do the bare minimum of thinking when I hit the gym. The stuff I want to work on in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is all loaded up into a spreadsheet and some Word documents, so before I train I can check on it and look at the moves that I'm trying to hit. And I also do this with my downtime, which leads us to no browsing. So something that affects us all in 2023 is analysis paralysis, which is basically the idea that the more choices we have, the harder it is to make any one choice at all. One of the worst times for this to happen is in your precious downtime, when it's very easy to flick around on like Netflix or Apple TV for 20 minutes, not finding anything you want to watch. So to get around this, I have the no browsing rule, which basically says that if something isn't already on my to watch list before I sit down to chill out in the evening, I am not allowed to watch it. This makes me a lot more conscious about the things I want to watch. If someone recommends a film and it sounds cool, then I'll put it on the list straight away. And if my YouTube feed serves me up a video I really want to watch, I put it on my watch later or one of my like designated playlists. I also do this with features online. So if something comes up during the day that I really want to read, I stick it on a list for later. And then later on, when I'm like in a queue or something, I don't have to mindlessly scroll around checking Twitter for entertainment. Which brings us to rule number 6, sowing and reaping. So you might be familiar with the sowing and reaping meme, which is basically someone going, me sowing, hell yeah! Me reaping, this sucks. And the idea of this is that actually you want both sowing and reaping to feel like fun. So the point of this is that I try and make time every day for both filling my mind with interesting stuff and then working out how to use some of that stuff in other ways. So a kind of important point here is that not everything I watch or read is specifically for anything. Quite often I'll read something just because I'm interested in it, and sometimes that will spark something in my brain. So for instance, I recently reread Tom Schoen's Blockbuster just because it's a great book and it's about a fascinating period of like cinematic history. And that led me to an anecdote about the jump scare in Jaws, which actually gave me a pretty good idea for a future video. Watch out for it. So I know some people listen to podcasts or audiobooks in every spare moment when they're like walking to the shops or doing housework or even in the shower. But personally, I think that time is valuable for creativity. It's when your brain goes into default mode and starts making connections between all the things you've already learned about. And it's the same in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If I've already got moves that I still haven't mastered, I don't really spend that much time watching instructionals. But when I find myself going over the same moves that I already know again and again, I know it's time to find a new thing to practice. Sowing and reaping. They should both make you go hell yeah. Rule 7, just do 1 minute. So the end of the day is usually when I pack in a lot of my side projects. After my wife goes to bed, I'll usually try and hit some piano practice and watch some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructionals. And I'm not gonna lie, there are days when I really don't want to do this. I would rather just crank up some Call of Duty or watch some Succession. I always feel better after some practice, and so my rule is just do 1 minute. I've already got my stuff ready, see rule 4. So I start where I left off and plan to just get a tiny little bit done. Like a few reps of a piano phrase that's given me trouble, or just one new simple jiu-jitsu technique. And sometimes that's enough and I go, okay, I'm not in the mood for this, I'm just gonna leave it today. But quite often, once I sit down, I get into whatever I'm doing and the time just flies by and then I've done a whole Pomodoro on it without even noticing. If you feel like the only options are half an hour on nothing, you're quite often gonna pick nothing. But if the minimum is a minute, it's really easy to start. So those are the rules I live by every day. If you want to see more about how I structure my week and how I actually fit everything in, I would recommend this video. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Enjoy your day.